Tonight on Primetime, tensions between Washington and Tehran are shifting once again as fresh diplomatic contacts reopen a channel many thought had stalled, with both sides preparing for renewed talks in Geneva. So, are we seeing real progress or careful positioning? Good evening. Diplomacy between Washington and Tehran is back in motion, with a new round of negotiations set for Geneva later this week. Now, both governments are signalling willingness to engage, but beneath that, deep divisions still remain.
A third round of talks between the United States and Iran is set to resume in Geneva on Thursday. That's according to Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, whose country has been mediating between the two sides. He said negotiations are proceeding with what he described as a positive push to go the extra mile towards finalising a deal. A senior Iranian official says the two sides remain sharply divided, particularly over the scope and sequencing of US sanctions relief. However, the official says Tehran is now offering fresh concessions in an effort to keep diplomacy alive and avert potential military escalation. Iran is reportedly prepared to consider sending part of its most highly enriched uranium abroad, diluting the remainder, and participating in a regional enrichment consortium in exchange for recognition of its right to peaceful nuclear enrichment and the lifting of economic sanctions. Tehran has also signalled openness to allowing US companies to invest in its oil and gas sector as part of a broader economic package. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, suggests Washington is losing patience.
I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure, with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do. And yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place. And yet they've been enriching well beyond the number that you need for civil nuclear. It's up to 60%. They're probably a week away from having industrial grade bomb making material, and that's really dangerous.
The talks come amid heightened tensions as Washington continues to build up military assets in the Middle East while pressing Tehran to curb its nuclear program. Experts say that both sides remain far apart, with key disagreements over sanctions, enrichment rights and regional security issues.
With talks between Washington and Tehran then set to resume in Geneva, expectations remain cautious. Well, joining us now from Belgrade is the geopolitical analyst Yelena Novikov to assess what each side is seeking and what they might concede. Yelena, great to see you. Thank you very much for joining us on Prime Time. Interesting there listening to Mr. Witkoff, wasn't it? A sense of confusion, frustration, if you like, on the part of President Trump as to why Tehran still hasn't, as he put it, capitulated. When you look at the Washington perspective, what is the primary objective, do you think, now going into these talks?
Well, Iran is facing a tremendous amount of pressure, both internally and externally, and the regime is probably currently at its weakest point. So these alleged serious offers that Iran might suggest later on this week are there to basically buy time. So I think that is also the main purpose of Iran giving these offers and their willingness to have a conversation. Now, I am not sure that any of these alleged offers, are going to be enough to stop a full-blown regime change that I believe the U.S. is planning, or Trump in particular by himself is planning. given the entire situation in the region, and with Israel pushing its own agenda in Gaza and still in the West Bank, and the Israeli lobby currently very strong in the U.S., I do believe that America is preparing a full regime change. We've seen that the U.S. Has resumed its policy of regime change with impunity, and I do not believe that a different fate is in store for Iran.
And what about the perspective in Tehran then? When they look at Geneva, what does a good outcome, what are they looking for in terms of the best possible outcome from these negotiations?
Well, the Pezeshkian government has proven to be quite inefficient, quite weak. The Ayatollah is getting more and more sidelined with the student protests. And I think, as I said, the regime is hanging on by a thread. So the main goal for Tehran in this moment is to buy time and to kind of perhaps divert this seemingly imminent military invasion, given that the U.S. has moved a large amount of arms in the region, again with another 50 fighter jets coming, and with Israel, of course, always pushing for an intervention in Iran. I do think that the main goal isn't even to lift sanctions, to get permission to continue to enrich this uranium, even though they have said that this is going to be peacefully forever, which is different than the 2015 agreement, which had its time frame. But I do not believe they think they are in the position to negotiate anything significant for Iran at this moment, other than to drag this negotiation process and buy some time for the student protests to kind of die down and to lesser the pressure on the regime that is going on right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, presumably if they want to buy that time, they're going to have to give Mr. Trump something tangible. In terms of the United States, I mean, they've long said no enrichment, no enrichment. You know, they've been absolutely resolute on that. Do you think the US, from their side, can afford to show some kind of flexibility, might be a little bit less belligerent than perhaps they have been, or do you think it's full steam ahead for the Trump administration?
Well, if we had another administration in the White House, perhaps these talks could have a different goal and could result differently. But again, this is the Trump administration, even more extreme than some previous Republican administrations have been in terms of warmongering and pushing America's interests internationally. However, with Trump, he has proven that he doesn't understand how basic economy works, how foreign policy works. He has no clue what diplomacy is. So I believe that this will come to basically the point, whatever he feels at that moment, and whoever is giving him what he believes to be best advice, which in this situation, I would say are his closest advisors, including Mike Huckabee, who is currently in Jerusalem and advocating for the expansion of Israel. So I do believe that this is maybe a curiosity at best for Trump, or he's trying to see if he can gain some economic advantage from Iran. I mean, Iranian officials have suggested that they are willing to develop some kind of a cooperation with the United States that might include some oil export. How that is going to go, that's probably going to be more clear, at least somewhat more clear after this week's talks. But in the end, this is just prolonging the inevitable, which I think the goal of the Trump administration is to perform regime change and kind of go with whatever Israel's goals are at the moment. With
all that in mind, Yelena, and you touched to some degree on this earlier, but do you think sanctions relief, I mean, that's long been a kind of strategic goal of Tehran, hasn't it? Do you think that's going to be ditched now, that they're really just going to solely focus on, as you put it, just buying more time?
I think they are definitely going to try and get some sanction relief out of this conversation, but I don't think they're going to push for it. I think they are simply going to focus mainly on getting permission to continue to enrich uranium, perhaps with giving full access to the International Atomic Energy Organization to those locations. Although we've seen that Trump's trust in international organizations is at all-time low, so that might not be enough for Trump in this moment. And yes, I do believe that Tehran and its officials are very, very aware of the situation they are in, and they will try to do anything to preserve themselves, at least until the student protests die down and that internal pressure is lowered.
And beyond the bilateral relationship, Yelena, if you look at the other important actors in this, Israel, the Gulf states, their positions have sort of shifted it somewhat, as this crisis has drawn out. Where are they right now? How are they influencing this as we head to these Geneva talks?
Right. Well, Israel's position has always been clear and very, very overt in these past two and a half years, with full support of both the Democratic and Republican administrations. Now, with the genocide in Gaza that is still ongoing and full-on plans to occupy the West Bank, and with this incredibly strong lobby in Washington, I think Israel is going to push the U.S. to do either a full-scale or invasion or something similar to a 12-day war with Iran. However, that hasn't worked the last time when Israel has tried to involve the U.S. into their war that they have started. And with the Gulf states, I do not think they will necessarily align themselves with Iran, given their own bilateral issues or trilateral issues. So I think the Gulf states are going to go with whatever the United States is offering to preserve and improve that relationship, and that might even include joining and signing the Abraham Accords with Israel. So Iran's interests are not definitely going to be considered, given that the position of the Gulf states is also going to be heightened and more powerful if Iran is out of the picture. Same goes with Israel and their expansionist plans.
And then finally, Yelena, I just want to ask you, have you got any hope that these talks are going to get us to any different result? Do you think that some kind of military contact now is all but inevitable?
Yes, I think you put that very well. I think it is quite inevitable now. Whether that is going to be in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, or at some point during the remainder of Trump's term, I think it's probably going to look like. I mean, we've heard reports from Axios that Israel is preparing for an operation similar to the 12-day war. Now, with inclusion of the U.S., I think it's all but inevitable. Now, again, when that is going to happen, I think it will be definitely clearer after Geneva.
Yelena, we thank you very much indeed for joining us and appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Andy Mioch. Stay tuned.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan, never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Prime Time. Now, Andy Mioch is here with the very latest business news stories. Andy, good to see you. What's on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, it's a pretty busy start to the week after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the president's tariffs illegal, those sweeping global tariffs, leaving trade partners and markets facing uncertainty. There's also some news on the Druzhba oil pipeline, as well as Beijing taking over the first spot as Berlin's trade partner in front of Washington. So let's have a look. World markets are mixed after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled most of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs illegal. Despite the ruling, Washington announced another tariff rate for all imports as its trade partners are trying to make sense of the new realities.
European shares dipped in choppy trading on Monday, rocked by a fresh wave of uncertainty regarding US trade policy after President Donald Trump announced a new rate of global tariffs. The pan-European stocks had capped last week with a record high after the US Supreme Court struck down tariffs that Trump had slapped on global economies last year. Over the weekend, Trump announced a new 10% rate and then lifted it to 15%, sparking ambiguity over the relevance of trade deals such as with the EU. The European Commission has ruled out changes. Trump's trade representative Jameson Greer said on Sunday that the US will not back out of tariff deals it has already sealed with countries around the world, including the UK, the EU, Japan, Switzerland and others. On Monday, the Stoxx slipped 0.3% to 628.62 points by 8:15 Greenwich Mean Time, with Germany's DAX down the most by 0.7%. Most sectors were in the red, with technology leading declines with a 1.3% drop, while banks, seen as more domestically focused, among the top gainers. Italy's biggest utility, Enel, gained 3.4% after saying it would increase its capital expenditure over the next 3 years, shifting focus to renewables, mainly in Europe and the US. Meanwhile, Asian markets rallied as Wall Street futures, and the dollar slid in Asia on Monday as confusion over US tariffs revived the Sell America trade, while confidence in the entire AI sector was set to be tested by results from tech giant Nvidia this week. In South Korea, the benchmark Korea Composite Stock Price Index opened up 94.5 points, or 1.63%. Taiwan's benchmark Taiwan Stock Exchange Capitalization Weighted Stock Index shot up at market open and rose 1.6% just before 10 a.m. The benchmark Jakarta Composite Index kicked off at 0.7% during market open, a recovery following its announcement of capital market reforms and a downgrade risk from MSCI. Amid the uncertainty, gold climbed to a 3-week high as the US Supreme Court's decision pressured the dollar and pushed investors to the safety of bullion. Spot gold climbed 0.6% to $5,136 per ounce by 7:29 Greenwich Mean Time, having earlier hit its highest since January 30th.
Well, joining me now from London to help us unpack this is political analyst with Economy First Limited, Klaus Jurgens. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, after the Supreme Court struck down all of those country-specific tariffs under IEEPA, Trump came out with a new tariff using a different law, flat 15% tariff on all imports. Now, when you look at this situation, are the countries that had a far higher rate, such as China, India, Brazil. Are they the winners here, and for how long?
Well, thanks for having me. It is, of course, another day where analysts are not entirely certain to say that President Donald Trump is doing the right thing, or that he is overreacting because he has a problem with the Supreme Court, as we all followed, of course. Now, I think there are two dimensions to this, and something which is very often overlooked. When Donald Trump was re-elected or elected to his second term, he said, make America great again. And he was not necessarily extremely specific about it. He spoke about migration and this and that. And then there was always this point that some opinion polls suggested the average American voter has lost the American purpose. Now, Donald Trump came along and he captured that mood, perhaps not by a huge swing vote, but he got re-elected nevertheless. One thing always missing was foreign policies and the economy. It's the economy, stupid, as a former Democrat advisor so famously said during one election campaign. Now, I am not entirely certain whether the tariff chaos, as it was coined this morning in Germany as well, the tariff chaos is actually helpful to either of Donald Trump's both legacy goals, the foreign dimension and the domestic dimension. That's the first point I want to make. Secondly, the European Parliament, of course, has decided to at least temporarily, not to halt, but to suspend inking the ongoing trade deal between the USA and the European Union. Now, this is a kind of playing to the gallery, because we have to be very clear about this. It's not only the European Parliament deciding, it is co-decision procedure. And the Council, of course, has something to say. And the institution actually managing all these deals is the European Commission. Now, they will see exactly what is in for Europe. Is this 15% up from 10 beneficial? Is it basically creating a very awkward situation that a deal which should have been agreed upon is now all of a sudden out in the open? Or is it true that what Donald Trump says, that previously agreed tariff deals will not be impacted? And you mentioned, if I may come back to your point, yes, who might be the winners? Some other countries who were facing much higher tariffs might actually come out as the laughing third. So it's an absolutely volatile situation. And believe me, this is the last thing the consumers want, investors want. Investors need stability. Consumers need fair prices. And I am not entirely certain whether Donald Trump's strategy will pay off, either for him or for anyone else.
There is a lot of confusion right now on the markets. As you've mentioned, the EU has hit pause on the trade deal with the United States. Now, a very select few has managed to negotiate a better rate than this flat 15%, and one of them is the United Kingdom at 10%. How do you expect the UK to react?
Well, the UK actually, and of course, let us not overlook, sometimes it's not meant cynical at all, watching the US from the United Kingdom. There are two distinct nations, of course, but they have extremely close relations, basically forever. And I don't see that this will change, and it will not change, most likely not even with the Epstein files. This is something totally different. Now, let's take one chaos separately at a time, if I may say so. Now, the United Kingdom, of course, out of the European Union after Brexit, wants to make sure it is a globally recognized trading partner for the United States. And the United States, probably realizing that, as was said sarcastically in the past, if you want to ring Europe, whom do you actually call? Now, perhaps Washington will realize it makes sense to have a very close, better relationship with London, perhaps give them preferential treatment. And then let's see what the Europeans are coming up with. The pausing of this agreement from the side of Brussels, I think, is tactical. I don't think it will be suspended at all. I think Brussels is playing a wait and see game, which underlines one of my biggest worries in this whole dimension. Is Washington taking the European Union still at face value? Has Brussels still so much political clout that it can actually negotiate better deals? Or is Washington playing the card, separate Italy from France, from Germany and from Spain, and let's deal with all of them separately? What perhaps Washington doesn't understand, there is a common trade policy, but yes, indeed, individual EU member states can do individual deals. So even this is adding confusion, as you say, and I was so much hoping that I can help you to clear a lot of that confusion. EU law is complicated. The bilateral relations amongst EU member states are complicated. And now we have the EU relations with Washington, and then to top it all up, UK-Washington relations. And all this comes at the exactly wrong point in time. Europe must be more competitive. America must be more competitive. There must be more employment. There must be training of young people, of medium to highly skilled people. And we should not really engage in tariff or trade wars. It is exactly the wrong point. And you know who is benefiting? Not only perhaps one country here or there, but again, the populist parties, the extreme political parties who say, oh, the establishment again cannot even negotiate a trade deal. What are they actually doing at all? It is, I don't really appreciate that situation. We need leadership, democratic leadership, and this includes contacts across the North Atlantic, and a trade war is the least we need.
Yes, old allies with a little bit of tension. Klaus, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your analysis.
Thank you.
And now, in another international standoff, Hungary says it will block EU's new Russia sanctions package and the 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine unless Kyiv resumes shipments of Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline. This comes ahead of the 4-year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Hungary wants Ukraine to restart oil shipments via the Druzhba pipeline immediately, and until this happens, Budapest will block the EU's next package of sanctions against Russia and decisions important to Kyiv, Hungary's foreign minister said on Monday. Speaking before a Foreign Affairs Council meeting in Brussels, Peter Szijjártó claimed that Ukraine was halting oil shipments through a pipeline supplying Hungarian refineries deliberately for a political reason. Shipments of Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia via the Druzhba pipeline have been cut off since January 27th, when Kyiv said a Russian drone strike hit pipeline equipment in western Ukraine. Slovakia and Hungary say Ukraine is to blame for the prolonged outage. The EU is currently preparing its 20th sanctions package against Russia over the war in Ukraine. While negotiations are ongoing, many member countries would like to agree the package in time for the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on Tuesday. Earlier, on Friday, Szijjártó said Hungary would block a 90 billion euro EU loan for Ukraine to fund its defense against Russia until the Druzhba shipments resumed. The EU needs to amend its budget law to unlock the loan, a step requiring unanimous backing.
New data published by Berlin shows that China overtook the United States as Germany's top trading partner. The report, published ahead of German Chancellor's Beijing visit, says exports to the US were hurt by Donald Trump's tariffs.
China has overtaken the US as Germany's most important trading partner, according to new figures released by Germany's Federal Statistical Office, Der Statis. The sum of exports and imports between the two countries last year totaled 251.8 billion euros, a 2.1% increase. China was Germany's most important trading partner from 2016 through to 2023. In 2024, the US briefly held the title. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is also set to visit China this week, where he is set to discuss trade and other topics. Germany last year imported goods worth 170.6 billion euros from China, an 8.8% increase from the year earlier. Chinese imports to Germany were mainly data processing equipment, electrical equipment, and machinery. Meanwhile, German exports to China last year totaled 81.3 billion euros, down 9.7% from the year earlier. The US was Germany's next top business partner last year, with a foreign trade turnover of 240.5 billion euros, a 5% drop from the year before. German exports to the US fell last year after US President Donald Trump introduced tariffs on imported goods from many countries, including Germany. German companies sold goods worth 146.2 billion euros to the US in 2025, a 9.4% drop year on year.
Moving on to industry news and starting with pharma. Shares in Denmark's Novo Nordisk are sliding after it announced disappointing results from a weight loss trial. An 84-week trial of its CagriSema weight loss product found that it caused a smaller weight loss than a product by their biggest rivals.
Novo Nordisk's next-generation obesity drug CagriSema was less effective than Eli Lilly's tirzepatide in a head-to-head trial, the Danish drug maker said on Monday, in a setback to its efforts to dominate the weight loss market. Novo Nordisk is fighting to regain first-mover advantage in the obesity treatment market, where demand for drugs with higher efficacy has surged. Its share price fell 15% by 11:30 Greenwich Mean Time, while Lilly shares rose 4% in US pre-market trading. Analysts had forecast prior to the results release that shares would be down at least 10% in the event of this scenario. Novo had positioned CagriSema as a more potent successor to its blockbuster Wegovy and a powerful contender to Lilly's Zepbound. But two previous studies that found it delivered less weight loss than expected had already disappointed investors. Tirzepatide is on the market and is sold in the United States under the brand names Zepbound for weight loss and Mounjaro for diabetes, as well as being marketed as Mounjaro in Europe as a treatment for both.
In the fashion industry, British luxury brand Burberry posted better than expected sales results. The company reported strong demand in China and a growth in sales to Gen Z customers.
Burberry beat expectations for sales growth in the key holiday quarter and forecast annual profit in line with analyst expectations, as the luxury brand's pivot refocusing on its British aesthetic paid off and Chinese demand improved. American CEO Joshua Schulman, who joined Burberry in 2024, has refocused the 170-year-old maker of checkered trench coats on outerwear and scarves, promoting accessible fashion, which has resonated with shoppers alongside marketing campaigns playing on British stereotypes. The company also reported strong growth in China as the luxury market there improved, and it attracted more Gen Z customers, with comparable sales increase of 6% in the region. Overall, third-quarter comparable sales rose 3%. Analysts on average were expecting sales growth of 2%, according to a company-compiled consensus.
And finally, in the world of fast food, Domino's Pizza beat financial expectations for the fourth quarter as more and more industry rivals offer value deals to attract budget-conscious customers.
Domino's Pizza beat Wall Street estimates for fourth quarter US same-store sales on Monday, sending the pizza chain's shares up about 5% in pre-market trading. Consumers, especially from lower-income households, are increasingly opting for home-cooked meals over eating out, as they tighten budgets amid rising prices on daily essentials, such as groceries and other food items. Domino's is offering more value deals to attract customers, as well as introducing new menu items. Fast food rivals, such as McDonald's and Taco Bell, have also launched value meals, intensifying competition to attract budget-conscious customers amid weak global demand. In the fourth quarter, US same-store sales at Domino's rose 3.7%, topping analysts' estimates of 3.4%, according to data compiled by LSEG.
And that is a wrap on the business brief for tonight. Handing it back to you, Guy.
Thanks, Andy. Making me hungry, and good to see them topping expectations there. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at mounting divisions in Brussels as EU ministers clash over new sanctions on Russia and a €90 billion package for Ukraine, with Hungary threatening a veto over disrupted oil supplies. Do stay with us.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Primetime. European Union foreign ministers gathered in Brussels as divisions deepened over a fresh round of sanctions on Russia and a proposed €90 billion support package for Ukraine. Hungary has warned it will veto both initiatives unless Russian oil supplies via the Druzhba pipeline are restored. Well, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas warned that member states are unlikely to agree on the bloc's 20th round of sanctions against Russia at this week's Foreign Affairs Council meeting, as Hungary continues to block consensus over the Druzhba oil dispute. Russian oil deliveries to Hungary and Slovakia have been disrupted since late January after damage to the pipeline, prompting Budapest to tie its support for sanctions to restoring those flows. At the Brussels session, ministers also touched on issues including the Gaza peace process and developments in Syria and Venezuela. Now, as EU unity is tested by Hungary's threat to block new sanctions and Ukraine support unless Druzhba oil flows resume, we're joined now by geopolitical analyst Ines Burrell, speaking to us from Torquay in the UK to unpack the strategic and energy calculations at play. Ines, very nice to be speaking to you. Thanks very much for joining us on PrimeTime. From Budapest's perspective then, this argument that energy security must take precedent over political signalling, is that a legitimate position to take, do you think?
Well, they absolutely have a point. Energy systems cannot be switched off just like that. And that is exactly why it took EU a very long time to arrange alternative supply routes, sign new contracts, and stabilize the markets. Russian oil wasn't cut off in one go. And when EU agreed on embargo in June 2022, Hungary received a special exemption. They were supposed to use this time well and diversify. The problem is that they did not. It's been nearly 3 years since that embargo and 4 years since the start of full-scale war. So diversification has moved, but very, very slowly. And so, yes, in effect, Hungary is in fact right that political signaling is not the right thing to do, but at this moment it's calling kettle black.
That's a good point. Hungary does say, though, and they have made this other point about EU solidarity should apply to member states' economic stability just as much as Ukraine's defence. I mean, that's a fair enough point, isn't it? With millions of people in member state countries seriously concerned about their own economic health.
You see, Hungary has never actually argued against the diversification of oil supply routes, at least not formally. Their position has always been that in principle it's very nice, everybody should diversify, but they should do as they please, or at least at the pace they would like to do it. So the argument they're making is essentially that everybody else can diversify, but Hungary is doing what it's doing. And it's not really clear why EU should accommodate what is in fact Hungary's national energy preference. From EU's perspective, energy independence from Russia is not an economic position, it's actually a security one. And it is very tightly tied to defense. So maybe it's Hungary who should be in solidarity with the rest of EU.
Yeah, I mean, in realistic terms then, if transit routes are not restored through Ukraine, does Hungary have any realistic alternatives?
What we have to understand is that Hungary prefers Russian oil basically due to technical and commercial reasons. It's not that it doesn't have oil. The main reason why it uses Russian oil is because its refineries are optimized for heavier Urals oil, unlike the lighter Brent and Azeri Light, which are usually used everywhere else in EU. So Hungary is used to acquiring more oil than it needs for its own purposes and then selling this oil off to other markets. And it's not like it will be left without oil. What will happen is that it can use one of the alternatives, which, for example, Ukraine has suggested the use of Odessa-Brody route, or there's one through Croatia. It's just that it's not Russian crude oil. So that means that they will get less profit from it. It's not exactly about shortage, it's about money.
Do you think Hungary's stance that weakens the bloc's coherence to some degree, or give us your impression of the impact?
Well, Hungary has been essentially operating on its own wavelengths for quite some time, and when it comes to Ukraine, then on a completely different planet, really. So European Union has been under question for quite some time. That said, EU has also been it's been very creative in its ways how it tiptoes around Hungarian objections, including asking Orban to go out for a cup of coffee and similar things. At the same time, in the immortal words attributed to Kaja Kallas, the state of the world is such that it might just be a good time to start drinking. It is really getting very serious. So, with the largest land war in Europe since the World War II, EU just has to make some tough decisions, and it cannot allow Hungary to just undermine its defense.
And the EU's had this long-term goal, hasn't it? It's spoken widely on it, about reducing dependence on Russian energy. Does restoring pipeline flow not in some way contradict that?
But we have to remember that it's not just about diversification, it's a matter of national security. At the start of full-scale war, it wasn't Europe that walked away, for example, from Russian gas. It was Russia who turned off the taps, hoping that it will be able to influence European governments. Well, luckily for us, we had a very, very mild winter, so our reserves lasted an entire year. But essentially, that lesson was learned, and that means that the EU cannot afford to give Russia power over it. So the diversification is not about economy, it is about security and safety.
Ines, we thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate your analysis very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, as these divisions emerge then at the latest meeting of the EU foreign ministers in Brussels, questions are growing over sanctions policy, financial support for Ukraine, and the bloc's broader strategic direction. To explore the economic and political implications, we're joined now by Antonio Nogueira Leite, Chair Professor at Nova SBE, speaking to us from Lisbon in Portugal. Professor Leite, it's very nice to see you again. Good to see you on Prime Time. After previous disagreements on sanctions and financial aid then, how significant is this moment for EU cohesion?
Well, this is a repeat of very similar events that we have had at the EU level, because right after the beginning of the war, it's going to be 4 years in a few days. We have had, at least one country several times, more than one, that were disagreeing on both the financial packages that were being set for military or civil aid to Ukraine, and also in terms of the sanctions that were being set forward by the EU. In all of those events, the end result was that the packages or the aid or even the sanctions were postponed for a while, and some sort of agreement was reached, either because the opposition was circumvented or because there was some I wouldn't say payment, but some conditions were set forward towards the disagreeing countries, notably Hungary. And in the end, what happened was that, with some delay, all of the previous packages were set forward in a very similar situation that we are facing today, because even though there are some peculiarities, as were mentioned before, in terms of a specific pipeline, which is crucial for Hungary, but the main problem has been the same that has been repeated over and over in the past 3 to 4 years.
How sensitive is the EU then to any further disruptions related to the Druzhba pipeline?
Well, this is very asymmetric in the sense that it's clearly a problem for Hungary, but it's a meaningless situation. It's not an important case to any other of the EU member countries, because they have been diversifying their natural gas sources. They have a lot of LNG imports, and some of them from the US. Some of them also part of the agreements with US, others from other regions, like other producers in the Caribbean, African countries, to some extent also the Gulf countries, but especially on the Western Hemisphere, because there are plenty of gas in the Western Hemisphere, and Europe has been successful in replacing that. On the other hand, the mix has been changing in many countries. There has been clearly a push towards other sources of energy, and so even though there is the system is not entirely stabilized, it's stabilized to a point that we have had 3-4 winters with barely any major event. Of course, Hungary is in a different situation because Hungary has not made, unlike some other countries in the region, has not made the adaptation for not using the supply coming from Russia. And therefore, having this pipeline cut, and there is disagreement on whether the Ukrainians could or not be able to put it to work in the condition that it was before. The Hungarians saying that it's actually a boycott. The Ukrainians not so clear on that, and also claiming what is also a fact, that their infrastructure, their energy infrastructure, has been under a huge battering by the Russian missiles and other sources of long-range artillery, and therefore this is clearly a problem for the supply and for the energy system in Hungary. But I don't think that the solution would be, and it won't be certainly, to stop helping Ukraine. So something has to be arranged. I don't know exactly how, but if the pattern of previous events comes forward again, we'll have some sort of settlement between the other 26 and Hungary. Sometimes now Slovakia also plays a very similar role as Hungary, and with some delay things will happen, and I think that's probably what we're going to see over the coming months. But of course, for Ukraine and those more keen on supporting Ukraine, in a situation where the U.S. has stepped backwards in terms of help, we clearly have I would say, a bigger problem than before from the Ukraine perspective, not so much from the European perspective. If we want to look just as what economists call first level effects, that is what's being the direct consequence of what's happening right now.
And Professor, when you look at the individual member states, is this kind of disobedience, if you like, is it limited to Hungary, or does it in any way signify any sort of broader disagreement, disunity on this issue?
No, I would say that the main countries in this agreement, also countries that have some political ties with Russia, in spite of everything, are Hungary and Slovakia. Other countries may have a more adamant position towards supporting Ukraine, or being, yes, pro-Ukraine, but not having that on the top of their mind all the time. And that has a lot to do with where they are geographically. So, for Poland, for the Baltics, this is a very dominant issue. If we come to the Atlantic shores where I am, well, this is an issue, but it's a fairly distant issue. So politicians act in accordance also to their individual pressure, because we are not one country, we are a federation of countries. But in the end, everybody has been agreeing, or not everybody, but there has been a consensus that this is important, because not because of Ukraine proper, but also because most people in Europe are convinced that Russia has plans for Europe to go beyond Ukraine. And so in that situation, helping Ukraine to resist is seen as relevant for Europe, going forward. Having said that, there's also in Europe a clear notion that our architecture is becoming a little outdated. I must say that the last time that we really had a major overhaul of the governmental architecture of the European Union was in the Treaty of Lisbon roughly 20 years ago. And some movements are being made in terms of maybe going forward to a several speed Europe. Where some countries will be the core that will move forward in terms of completing the single market, which is something we have been talking about for 30 years, but now, it's pretty obvious that it's not completed in some areas. Even in terms of other common policies that some countries are stepping forward and other countries are more on the periphery of decision. So I may imagine, even if we're not going to a several tiers of commitment in the European project, I will think that we will go forward with a revision of the Lisbon Treaty, because the Lisbon Treaty, what happened, like I said, a long time ago, and what we have right now as the situation, the geopolitical situation we're all facing, in which Europe is integrated, is clearly different. So I think this will happen at some times. We see some not formal initiatives towards that, but we see informal initiatives with the bigger economies, with the bigger countries. And maybe other countries will join that core going forward. On the other hand, there has been a lot of talk in terms of like foreign policy issues, which are taken by unanimity, or some other financial issues, not all financial issues, but some financial issues also require unanimity. There has been talk of replacing unanimity for a strong majority. But of course, that can only happen with a revision of the treaties. So I say it's not for today, it's not for tomorrow, probably certainly not for this year. But I would say in the coming years, we'll see some major revision in the treaty and also in the architecture, and probably the possibility for some countries that are, in a way, more divergent towards what is the common policy will probably be a little tougher because, there will be means to come to a decision not involving necessarily all of the member countries. And that will be a more relevant issue as some other countries, especially in the Balkans and the East, are moving towards entry. It's clearly the time to look at the treaties, to revise the treaties, and we'll see what happens. Probably the situation of countries that oppose the majority will be more difficult going forward after that revision comes.
And Professor, that's the political architecture. What about the markets in all this? This current disagreement, dispute, if you like, probably not enough to worry investor confidence too much. But more widely, how are investors, markets treating this wider subject of EU financial support for Ukraine?
Well, for now, I would say that it's not a major issue. Where Europe was able to finance some of that at a better rate than, for example, France is financing itself. But of course, this comes together with a series of other issues that need address and are not being, in my way of thinking, correctly addressed. Like, for example, what's happening with the French public debt and the French deficit. And so I think that probably because we see the French government as, in the final months of its mandate, and the French president, coming to the end of his presidency. We are not taking all the measures, but France is a problem that needs to be addressed, and together with France, this one as well. But on the other hand, if we look at the whole of the EU, we see that we have still a solid financial condition, for example, vis-a-vis a country that has a stronger economy, that is growing faster, but has, very shady public finances, like is the case of the US. So, markets are still comfortable also because the benchmarks are not as good as they used to be in the old days. That's my opinion. So for now, Europe still keeps financing its activity at very decent rates, at benchmark rates. I don't see this particular situation as one that will change the way in which European countries and European companies and other institutions will be able to go forward financing themselves at competitive rates. But like I said, we have, together with this, other problems that together compound something that has not been addressed and needs to be addressed. And one day the market will probably wake up. And so we have to be ready for that.
And finally, Professor, do you think this recent episode kind of accelerates the EU's push for greater energy diversity?
This one, to tell you the truth, I think that the need for diversity and the urgency of changing our energy apparatus has been around for, I would say, since 2022. So, of course, this is a signal, but it's a signal that is not affecting others or many others or substantially others than Hungary. So, I think that right now our problem is not the having cut most of the dependency from Russia. The problem is probably the political choices regarding the policy mix, where we are probably going too much into replacing everything for renewables. And that, of course, will put some stress on the networks, will put some stress on peak usage. And I think that some ideological view of the energy market in Europe is probably being pushed too far, especially when we compare with what's going on in the US or China or other economies. Of course, we should move forward to decarbonization and to more renewables, but renewables alone will not replace everything of what we had in our settings before that. So I think Europe has solved its short-term emergent dependency problem, but it's not solving in a sustainable way the reframing of the energy system. Also because we still have very expensive energy compared to other competitors, and so in that sense, of course, peace would be nice and will be important, but there are other things that Europe is overlooking and should be put into the equation, going, not just going forward with ideology and this idea that will be the green example to the world. We can't do that if it costs our economy and the welfare of our population. So there is a trade-off here that I think Europe needs to think through in a more pragmatic way than what it has been doing so far.
Professor, we always appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at rising strains between Afghanistan and Pakistan following cross-border airstrikes. Don't go away.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Today in the
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note to clear. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port
Welcome back to Primetime. Strains are intensifying between Afghanistan and Pakistan after the recent Pakistan airstrikes, with the Taliban saying civilians were killed. Now, Islamabad insists it targeted militant camps linked to recent suicide attacks in Pakistan. A News correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now from Kabul.
Tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan are escalating after Pakistan conducted airstrikes inside Afghan territory. Kabul has reacted sharply. The Ministry of Defense has described the strikes as a blatant violation of Afghanistan's sovereignty and international law, warning that attacks on civilian areas and religious centers will not go unanswered. In a statement, the ministry said a measured response would be delivered at the appropriate time, stressing that the country's territorial integrity is not negotiable. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Pakistan's ambassador and delivered a formal protest note, calling the strikes a breach of territorial integrity and a provocative act that risks further destabilizing relations. According to local reports, the strike hit Baisud district in Nangarhar early Sunday, killing around 20 members of a single family in Gardi Kach village and injuring several others. A religious seminary in Paktika province was also reportedly targeted. Islamabad accuses Kabul of failing to act against militants from Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan group it says is operating from Afghan soil. It says it has evidence linking recent attacks in Pakistan to leadership figures based across the border. The strikes mark a sharp escalation in tensions just months after the two sides agreed to a fragile ceasefire following deadly border clashes. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, as tensions escalate between Kabul and Islamabad following those cross-border airstrikes, we're joined now by political analyst Devasha Pant, who's speaking to us from London. She's going to help us unpack the strategic, diplomatic and regional implications. Devasha, very nice to see you again on Primetime. Let's get into this then. What factors appear to have driven the timing of these cross-border strikes?
Well, this isn't the first time Pakistan has carried out a cross-border strikes into Afghanistan. Similar operations have followed major militant attacks in the past, particularly when Islamabad believed TTP was operating from across the border. This latest strikes comes after a concentrated wave of violence in February, which Pakistani authorities say were linked to militant based in Afghanistan. So the timing reflects a confluence of immediate security pressure and a long-term frustration. And domestically, the government and military were under pressure to respond decisively to rising attacks and reassure the public. Strategically, it signals that Pakistan is willing to act unilaterally if it believes Kabul is not addressing militant sanctuaries, reinforcing a pattern in how Islamabad manages cross-border security threats.
Yeah, let's just examine some of those claims you touched on there. Pakistan obviously maintains that militant groups operating inside of Afghan territory have been responsible for this. How credible are those claims? What evidence is there?
Well, Pakistan's assertions are consistent with its long-held narrative that factions of the TTP and affiliates linked to Islamic State Khorasan are operating across the 2,600-kilometer frontier and have been responsible for recent attacks. Islamabad has issued official statements claiming it has conclusive evidences tying attackers to Afghan-based handlers. However, independent public evidences remain limited. Afghan authorities reject the allegations outright, and Kabul's defense ministry and local sources counter that civilian areas were hit and no credible evidence of militant presence has been shared. So the international reporting suggests there are genuine security concerns about multiple militant networks in parts of Afghanistan, but pinpointing specific operational control or safe havens have proven difficult for the outside monitors. So without shared, independently verifiable data, the credibility of Pakistan's claim beyond its own shared statement will remain contested by the external observers.
And Devasha, language also very interesting in this, isn't it? Kabul has called the strikes a violation of sovereignty. How significant is that terminology in diplomatic terms?
Yes. Well, first, any such initiative, especially cross-border militant action, is likely to impact civilians in broader areas far more than policymakers in the capital. These regions are already economically fragile, heavily scrutinized, and dependent on cross-border movement of trade, family ties, and livelihood. When these airstrikes occur, even if aimed at militant targets, civilians bear the immediate consequences of displacement, casualties, damaged home, and fear of further escalation. So it is including the local perspective, it is a very serious diplomatic charge as well. Sovereignty is a cornerstone of international law, and Kabul's foreign ministry has publicly condemned the airstrike as a breach of Afghan airspace, summoning Pakistan's ambassador and warning of consequences. Such language are to elevate the dispute from security disagreement into a political conflict. It complicates any effort at negotiation because it signals that Afghanistan views the incursions not simply as self-defense, but as illegitimate interference, and this might intensify mistrust and reduce the diplomatic spaces for back-channel talk or confidence-building measures.
Yeah, you mentioned there the importance of citizens, ordinary people, in this whole process. What is going on in terms of public sentiment at the moment on both sides?
Well, the reports of civilian casualties are likely to inflame public sentiment on both sides of the border. In Afghanistan, the injuries and deaths among families, children, and local communities may fuel anger towards the Pakistani political efforts and strengthen hardline voices and pressure Kabul's authorities to respond more actively. In Pakistan, while some may see this strike as justified retaliation against militants, awareness of civilian harm can provoke criticism from human rights groups and the opposition parties, complicating the government's narrative of precision and restraint. And politically, civilian casualties raise the stakes for both government, making compromises harder and increasing the risk of further escalations.
Yeah, and on that, finally, Devasha, where is this all going, do you think? Are we going to stay at the level of sort of tit-for-tat crisis management, or is this likely to escalate into something much more substantial?
Well, this escalation point points less to a temporary crisis and more into a deeper structural strain in Afghanistan-Pakistan relations. While the recent ceasefire offered a pause in hostilities, it did not address the underlying issue of mistrust over cross-border militant network, weak mechanism for verifying threats, and historical grievances from both sides. So Pakistan perceives Afghanistan as failing to control sanctuaries for groups like TTP, while Kabul sees repeated strikes as violation of sovereignty. And without a sustained enforceable agreement and transparent security cooperation, these tensions are likely to recur, suggesting that the relationship remains fragile and structurally strained rather than simply experiencing a short-term flare-up.
Devasha, great to have you with us. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Hungary's response after crude oil flows through the Druzhba pipeline were halted, prompting Prime Minister Viktor Orban to unveil a series of retaliatory measures. Do stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has unveiled a package of retaliatory steps after Ukraine halted crude oil shipments to Hungary through the Druzhba pipeline. Now, Orban says Hungary will safeguard its energy security and continue taking action until oil deliveries resume. The government is suspending diesel exports to Ukraine, blocking a proposed €90 billion EU military facility for Kyiv, and opposing the bloc's planned 20th sanctions package on Russia. Well, Budapest has made clear it will veto the new measures at the Foreign Affairs Council, accusing Ukraine of using fuel transit as political leverage ahead of Hungary's elections. Officials say part of Hungary's strategic reserves has been released, with additional supply secured through maritime routes. Well, as these tensions rise within the European Union over sanctions and energy security, we're joined now by EU policy expert Vlad Ramino to assess what this standoff means for cohesion, decision-making and the bloc's strategic direction. Vlad, very nice indeed to have you with us. How serious is this then for the EU, do you think, this dispute?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And second of all, for the EU, I think the EU had the habit of Mr. Orban for a number of times. If we remember, that was the situation at the end of last year with a special council in December back in Brussels, where, yes, the Hungary was opposed to that as well. This is where the plan came in, the current plan, the 90 billion plan, to which Mr. Orban is opposed today. That is the plan of the month of December. There is a plan B, as Vice President Kallas said today, which actually used to be the plan A, and that is the use of the frozen assets of Russia. So there are solutions there. Nothing new from Viktor Orban. I think Viktor Orban is increasingly nervous, given that he has elections very soon in Hungary in April. And that many of the polls show that he may actually lose those elections.
And do you think, nevertheless, that there is any legal authority and any solid ground at all for Mr. Orban to put any conditions on his sort of joining the collective measures?
None whatsoever. I have listened very carefully to the arguments made by his foreign affairs minister, including the arguments accusing the Commission to be the Commission of Ukraine and not the Commission of the member states. Again, the 90 billion solution was discussed in December at the Council. It was agreed at the Council in December. It was agreed by the rules of the Council, that is by unanimity. So at that moment, Hungary had no issue whatsoever. It accepted the solution. Now what Hungary is doing, and not Hungary, but Mr. Orban in particular, is basically coming back to an agreement that was made and redrawing an agreement made in December at the Council. Legally speaking, the Council can decide. The Council disposes in matters of foreign policy. It is not the first loan to Ukraine. There was a series of loans made to Ukraine. There is a clear commitment to support Ukraine from the European Council. So legally speaking, the Council has all rights there for as long as the decision is taken by the rule of the Council. The decision was taken by the rule in December, and now Hungary just decided to come back to a decision already made and change its mind.
And Vlad, this intersection between energy security and Ukraine policy, do you think this is likely to cause future problems, disunity, disagreement within the bloc?
It is a very, very good question. I do think that actually, if we look over the last, especially the last couple of years, I would say, so 2024 and 2025, more Hungary has opposed vetoes, sometimes alone, sometimes with Slovakia. More Hungary has opposed vetoes, more unity those vetoes created in the remaining of the members of the Council. And you can see it even today. So the main reaction to the Hungarian veto came from the European institutions, but the main reaction from member states came from Poland and Germany in this order, with both being astonished, but Poland being reminding the Foreign Affairs Minister of Poland, Mr. Sikorski, reminding in the Council today that Hungary, of them all, should know what Russian aggression looks like, given the 1956 issue that they had. So I think generally, before, if we look in the years 2010, 15, 20, there was a coalition called the Visegrad Coalition, with Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czechia together. Now that coalition clearly doesn't function anymore. And even those members have now created this, entente, as the word goes in Brussels, with the other member states. You see Mr. Sikorski now on the screen, arriving to the council actually. So I think more Hungary puts a veto, higher the probability that the others would stick together rather than go apart.
And if that does happen, if Hungary does keep blocking, whether it's funding mechanisms or sanctions, and this unity does solidify as you've described, what practical options does Brussels have? What action do you think it could take?
So in this case, I think Brussels has, the issue with Brussels is that in this particular case, Brussels needs to rush. There are very worrying signs that the finances of Ukraine would not stand over the months of April. So there needs to be a package to be able to assist and help Ukraine before that moment. So the issue here is time. Otherwise, I would say that Brussels, and probably the best option of Brussels, would be to wait simply for elections in Hungary to happen, given what the polls suggest. I don't think that Brussels will do that, though. I think Brussels will explore all other possibilities, including financing possibilities, blocking or not allowing certain funds and certain amounts to Hungary to be paid. As we know, Hungary had a number of issues, including rule of law issues, for quite some time. So that would not be new. There are funds blocked already. Probably the pressure from Brussels will increase, and not just from Brussels. I think this time around the pressure will come from everybody, from Paris, from Berlin, from Rome, from Warsaw, and dare I say, maybe even from Bratislava.
And finally, Vlad, do you think all of this strengthens the argument for speeding up energy diversity across the EU?
Definitely. Definitely, yes. It's clear that having dependencies, and this goes very much into the current discussion at the EU level on strategic autonomy. If you look at the discussion on strategic autonomy, one of the main topics, one of the main pillars of the discussion is energy and energy diversification. So clearly that goes into that debate. So yes, it will strengthen the diversification argument. The Union is investing massively in diversification currently, so that I think will continue. Hungary there made different calculations. So Hungary made clearly, for the moment at least, calculations based on dependencies on Russia. But on that, Hungary is increasingly alone. There are other member states which are a bit dependent. Look at Bulgaria. So there are member states which are a bit dependent, but those dependencies are decreasing very fast, if at all remainant. So Hungary made a different choice than everybody else as a member of the European Union.
Vlad, great to have you with us as always. Thanks again for your analysis.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Don't go away.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
A warm welcome back to Primetime. Now let's head to our correspondents around the globe. And in Westminster, fresh allegations linked to Jeffrey Epstein are reigniting political pressure, with a senior Conservative MP raising the prospect of treason and demanding a parliamentary inquiry into possible corruption and foreign influence. A News correspondent in Manchester reports.
The UK's former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat has raised the prospect of treason as he called for a special parliamentary committee made up of MPs, peers and retired judges to investigate Epstein-linked allegations involving Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Lord Mandelson. In an interview with the Sun newspaper, he said the body should have powers to summon witnesses and demand documents to examine allegations of foreign influence and national security risks linked to the Epstein scandal. Tugendhat questioned what the palace and ministers knew and whether Britain's treason laws, written more than 700 years ago, need to be updated. He said Parliament must consider what the scandal means for the country beyond what a court might decide. Under UK law, treason includes plotting the death of the monarch, waging war against the crown or aiding the king's enemies. If proven, it is one of the most serious crimes in British law, historically carrying the death penalty and now punishable by life imprisonment. Both Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Lord Mandelson are under police investigation for alleged misconduct in public office, but both deny any criminal wrongdoing. The former prince was arrested and released under investigation over claims he passed confidential reports while serving as a trade envoy. Mandelson is alleged to have shared market-sensitive information with Epstein while a government minister. If treason were ever proven, it would mean a member of the royal family committed one of the gravest crimes against the crown during the reign of his own mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The last person convicted of treason in the UK was jailed in 2023 over a plot to kill Queen Elizabeth, for which he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Zena Farisada, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Georgia is sharpening its focus on regional connectivity, doubling down on its ambition to remain a key transit hub in the South Caucasus. High-level economic talks in Armenia underline Tbilisi's push to deepen cooperation with close neighbours, back peace-building efforts and secure its place among emerging transport corridors. A-News's Nini Nikolashvili reports.
Georgia has been steadily increasing its engagement with Armenia over the past 2 years with frequent high-level visits and growing economic coordination. This reflects Georgia's broader strategy to position itself as a central connector between Europe, Asia and the South Caucasus through the so-called Middle Corridor, a major transit route linking Asian and European markets. This strategic direction was highlighted during the recent visit of Georgia's economy minister, Mariam Kriushvili, to Armenia, where she held talks with Armenia's economy minister, Gevorg Papoyan. The ministers discussed expanding cooperation in transport infrastructure, energy connectivity, and trade, key elements that support Georgia's long-term transit ambitions. The discussions come at an important moment for the region. With ongoing peace efforts between Armenia and Azerbaijan and new regional transport initiatives under consideration, Armenia may gain alternative connectivity routes that could potentially compete with Georgia's traditional transit role. In response, Georgia is actively strengthening its partnership with Armenia to ensure that it remains a critical link in regional logistics and trade networks. A notable step in this direction is Georgia's decision to impose symbolic tariffs on the transit of Azerbaijani oil products to Armenia through its territory. This measure supports Armenia's access to energy supplies while reinforcing Georgia's role as a reliable transit partner. At the same time, it allows Georgia to maintain its economic and strategic relevance in regional transport flows. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Uzbekistan is accelerating its move into the digital economy, with more than 661,000 citizens now registered on licensed crypto platforms, and the country issuing its first official cryptocurrency mining license under a defined regulatory framework. A-News's correspondent in Tashkent has more.
Uzbekistan's regulated cryptocurrency sectors continues to expand rapidly, with about 661,000 residents registered on licensed crypto platforms, according to the National Agency for Prospective Projects. The country currently has 21 authorized crypto service providers, including crypto exchange, custodial depositories, and crypto shops. Since 2022, companies operating in the crypto sectors have paid more than $1.19 billion in state duties and fees. In January, Uzbekistan issued its first official cryptocurrency mining permit to a private company in the Bukhara region. The 5-year permit allows legal mining operations only at registered addresses with mandatory transparency and reporting. The regulation also requires that mining predominantly uses electricity generated from solar or self-owned power sources, helping to minimize load on public grids. Regulators continue to prohibit hidden mining operations and anonymous crypto asset extraction, emphasizing that the licensing framework is designed to support innovation while guarding against financial crime and ensuring energy stability. Authorities have also underscored the sector's contribution to broader tech ecosystem development, pointing to job creation, fintech entrepreneurship, and increased youth engagement with digital finance. It is Ivry Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Central Asia is set to experience a sharp rise in population over the next 2 decades. Now, the trend is expected to put growing pressure on infrastructure, water supplies and transport links across the region. Our correspondent reports now from Almaty.
The population of Central Asia could reach 96 million people by 2040. This forecast comes from the Eurasian Development Bank. According to the bank, rapid population growth has the potential to become a strong economic driver for the region. At the same time, it's putting increasing pressure on infrastructure, energy systems, transport networks, and water resources are already facing growing demand. Without a major push in energy efficiency, modern mobility, and water management, sustainable development will be difficult to achieve. Water scarcity is emerging as a structural challenge. Estimates from the Eurasian Development Bank suggest that by 2028, Central Asia could face an annual water deficit of between 5 and 12 cubic kilometers. A significant share of water is lost due to aging infrastructure, and without modernization, these losses are expected to increase. Geography remains another constraint. Central Asia's distance from ocean ports raises the cost of trade by 20 to 40%. The bank describes this as a distance tax, a permanent burden that limits competitiveness and slows economic growth. To address this, the bank points to the need for a network of transport corridors across Eurasia aimed at reducing trade costs. Particular attention is given to north to south routes in the Trans-Afghan corridor, which could provide Central Asia with access to markets in South Asia and the Gulf region. And despite these challenges, Central Asia remains one of the fastest growing regions in Eurasia. According to UNICEF, the region's population surpassed 84 million by 2025. The Eurasian Development Bank expects the combined economies of the 5 Central Asian countries to reach $600 billion by 2026. And experts stress that future progress will depend on how effectively the region responds to 3 closely linked challenges: demographic growth, transport connectivity, and water security. Fariza Kalimurzana, Almaty, A News.
Okay, let's turn now to some of the other major developments around the world. And we begin in Mexico. Highways in several states have been blocked, vehicles set on fire, and flights suspended after a large-scale military operation killed the country's most wanted cartel leader, El Mencho, on Sunday. Now, residents in affected areas are being urged to remain indoors. Here's more.
Mexico has been gripped by violence following the killing of one of the country's most powerful drug lords, Nemesio Oseguera, better known as El Mencho, during a military operation in the western state of Jalisco on Sunday. The Defense Ministry says a shootout left Oseguera seriously injured. Officials say he later died while being airlifted to Mexico City. The Mexican embassy in Washington said U.S. intelligence assistance supported the operation. The raid sparked an immediate wave of retaliation across several states. Burning vehicles, road blockades and arson attacks by armed groups were reported in Jalisco, Michoacán, Guanajuato and Oaxaca.
We experienced critical hours in which incidents were addressed in different parts of the state and the metropolitan area. Coordination between various agencies at all levels of government was key. The main objective on this day has been to safeguard the safety of the people. Therefore, early this morning, from this security meeting, which is in permanent session, we activated Code Red, which remains in effect.
Gunmen used torched cars to block highways in an apparent attempt to disrupt security operations. Residents described scenes of fear and uncertainty as the unrest unfolded.
Look, now we're scared. We only go out when it's necessary because people don't know whether to go out or what to do. It's good that they're finishing with these organizations, but there's fear because of what is happening now. You don't know how to react.
The U.S. Embassy in Mexico urged American citizens in affected areas to shelter in place and limit movement, citing security concerns. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum sought to reassure the public, saying there was absolute coordination between federal and state authorities and urged people to remain calm. Oseguera's death marks a significant blow to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations and a major player in cocaine and fentanyl trafficking into the United States. However, security analysts warn that the removal of such a high-profile cartel leader can trigger violent power struggles, raising concerns that further instability may follow.
And here in Baku, a new exhibition titled Hojali, Voices of the Silent Through the Lens of Reza Degati revisits the tragedy that unfolded 34 years ago through striking photography. The display also underscores the importance of preserving historical memory and passing the truth of those events to younger generations.
An exhibition dedicated to the victims of the Kojali tragedy has opened in Baku, bringing together visitors, historians and young people to reflect on events that unfolded 34 years ago in Kojali.
At the photo exhibition dedicated to Hojali, the traces of war and human destinies are presented through documentary photographs. The exhibition conveys a message of remembrance and the preservation of historical memory.
The photographs, stark, emotional and unfiltered, were taken by internationally renowned photojournalist Reza Degati shortly after the tragedy. Through his lens, the human consequences of war are laid bare: grief, displacement and shattered communities. Organisers say the exhibition is not only about remembrance, but also about preserving historical memory and informing younger generations through the language of documentary photography.
So I have been under pressure over 34 years because of showing the truth of what I have seen. I have been in 110 countries. I have seen a lot of other stories in the world, but this is the only one that when I'm showing, there's such a pressure over my shoulder and my works, and they tried to destroy a lot of my exhibition. I am voice of the voiceless people. There are a lot of things happening in the world, a lot of nation, a lot of population, which they are under pressure and suffering, and also, let's say, nobody understands what's going on. Or, in the case of the Azerbaijan and Armenia, the narration that is told to the world is the wrong one in the same. So I have been over all my works, in everywhere I have done works, being voice of the voiceless people.
For more than 3 decades, Dagati has exhibited photographs related to Khojaly in various countries, including Malaysia, France and the United States, bringing international attention to the tragedy. The exhibition in Baku serves as both a tribute to the victims and a reminder of the importance of documenting history.
Now, something to watch out for. A News's Deputy Editor-in-Chief Orkan Amashov sat down exclusively with Iran's Minister of Roads and Urban Development and co-chair of the Azerbaijan-Iran Joint Economic Commission for a detailed discussion on regional connectivity and cooperation. Now, the talks centred on progress along the international north-south transport corridor and plans for a new highway bridge over the Araz River. Both sides underlined the strategic significance of the Araz route, linking mainland Azerbaijan with the Nakhchivan region through Iran, while also acknowledging the broader debate surrounding the proposed Zangezur corridor. And you can watch it tomorrow on A News.
Naturally, Araz corridor is an important part of regional connectivity. It's always good to have options. There's one connection line there, connecting Azerbaijan's mainland with Nakhchivan via Armenia, which is the Zangezur corridor. Araz corridor is a second route. It's always good to have options and alternatives there.
I would like to touch upon the Araz corridor once again, and I would like to state that the developments regarding Araz corridor are part of the agreement, arrangement and an understanding between 2 friendly, brotherly and neighbouring countries. But the other corridor mentioned is a development that took place at the initiative of or with the participation of a country outside the region, and these two are, of course, different from each other.
Regarding Zangezur corridor being an external imposition, well, it's a bilateral arrangement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, supported by the United States. But Araz corridor is Azerbaijani-Iranian bilateral dimension, and for Azerbaijan, first one is priority, second one is also absolutely vital.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's Primetime. Do not miss that Orkan Amashov interview tomorrow. And of course, we'll be back with more news and analysis. From all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.